Welcome to Primary, Roger. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks, Sandras. It's really great to be here. Yeah, I've already chatted to a couple of very interesting entrepreneurs, so a lot of imposter syndrome right now, so all the cool stuff you're going to do.
What is your first job when you finished school?
Yeah, so my first job was when I was still at school. I waited, I didn't have much pocket money. I remember back in the day, I'd get £5 a month. Back when you remember what that was. Yeah, showing a bit of my age now, but so I never got about. I held out as long as possible. A bunch of my friends started waitering or like working in video stores and that sort of thing. But what I did is I waited till I really needed something, and then I put together a one-page business plan to my dad to buy the sound equipment. He lent me some money off that one-page business plan. We bought some sound equipment, and I got a twin brother, and the two of us we were twin tunes, at DJ Twin Tunes, and we did a whole bunch of everything from pick and pay brew competitions through to 13th birthday parties and 60th and 20. Our bread and butter was 21st, and so from about halfway through high school all the way through university, we did DJing and moving sound equipment, paid the sound equipment off in 6 months, and yeah, carried on from there. Now I would make in one evening my third, so a third for the business, a third for my brother, a third for me, and in one evening I would make more money than my friends would make like 4 or 5 days waitering, so it was just pretty good going. Free food, free booze, and everyone loves DJ.
Absolutely. And then now we fast forward to the time when you started now into entrepreneurship and startups. Could you tell us about that period, and then what are some of the successes and the failures?
Yeah, it's mostly most of my successes have come out of the failures. I'd always been sailing, was my sort of sport at school. My dad was into it and just kind of pulled us into it. And so I sailed the Cape Touriras and eventually ended up in the Caribbean and started working on super yachts, completely fortuitously. I started as a deckhand scrubbing, polishing stainless steel and scrubbing decks. And then helped the engineer out a bit and ended up getting the chief engineers, he ended up working as engineer, and long story short, spent 4 years working as a chief engineer on super yachts, and kind of fell into that, and then realized I didn't want to be in yachts for the rest of my life, so came back to South Africa. I decided that a better way you can't really study entrepreneurship, I think there are better courses now, you couldn't back then. A better way to do it is to pay myself the money and take 2 years off. So I took a little bit, I called my midlife retirement, and I spent all of my savings in that time, but really what I did in the first year, I interned at about 8 to 9 different startups. I worked with a life coach, productizing his methodology. I worked with a bunch of startups, literally just phoning them up saying, hey, this is my situation, give me a cool project to do. And I did product market fit surveys, and I worked in, like most tech startups would give you the stuff that the CEOs would give you, the stuff that they didn't have capacity to do. And so yeah, kind of they gave me a bunch of cool work, and I started learning about startups, and then in 2010, I ran the Silicon Cape initiative. I kind of put my hand up and said, hey Kai, this looks interesting, and I ran it, and I built my personal brand, educated myself around entrepreneurship, and built my network in the local tech startup scene around 2010. And so that's kind of how I got into it and where it got started, and yeah.
Brilliant, yeah, I think I knew your name first from the Silicon Cape initiative, and then the Lean Iterator. Tell us about that, and what drove that, and what you're trying to achieve with
But that first part of helping entrepreneurs work out what it is they need to build, that is one of the most difficult things. And it's the thing that most people get wrong. So many people, especially running a dev house, have got a team of developers that has this massive salary bill. But people come in and they say, okay, I've got this money, I want to build this app. And that's like the worst possible way of doing that. So I actually reached out to who's now a friend. He was a competitor at the time, David Campy from Afro Labs. And we kind of compared notes, and he called it the anti-sales process. It was all the reasons why he told the entrepreneur you're not ready for the technology. And that's go speak to customers, go validate the business model, go build a prototype, like work out low code, MVP tools, like that sort of thing. And we both had very similar processes. So we started documenting that and combining our knowledge into a process. Ended up sitting actually at a Silicon Cape committee meeting. I was sitting across from somebody, one of the community members was running a program at UCT Graduate School of Business, venture incubation program, and she's like, I've got an accelerator starting in 3 weeks and I don't have a program. And I was like, well, I'm kind of writing one for you if you want. So we gave it to them and helped them design that program. Another friend of mine, actually, we were bouncing the ideas off sold the idea into Alan Gray without us even knowing about it, and then came back to me when he was like, hey, I just landed this project, can you help me deliver it? And that was the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. The IVC process was based off our methodology of the 3 of the 5 steps that we unpacked. And then we worked with Standard Bank, created some internal innovation programs, some work with the D School. I was chatting to someone about that earlier, creating sort of blending lean start with design thinking. And so, yeah, I've coached about probably 450, 500 entrepreneurs through various different programs and mentored in Techstars and a whole bunch of stuff. And then I've actually worked through PlayLogix and through Founders Factory Africa, worked probably with about 70 different entrepreneurs, actually building shipping tech products. So working out what is the tech we need to build, how do we build less, how do we focus, how to build less, and how do we ship faster. And so that process of working with entrepreneurs, sorry, long story short, but the process of how to work out what to build, how to build, and then ultimately got sold into a number of different accelerator programs. And the videos, there's 6.5 hours of video lectures on YouTube if you're looking for lean iterator stuff. This is all about the early validation process, and that was the lean iterator was the brand we put that under. It's currently sitting in a non-profit called Level Up that does entrepreneurship and developer coding that David and I. So
I think they're like, we agree like on so many things. I'm one of the 450 people that you taught, right? And I think we're getting, at Primary, we get similar things. Like people come to us say, hey, I've got money and I built this, right? I've spent $250,000, or some people, like there was one person who came and spent 1.5 million rand. They built stuff, say, help us market it. Like, have you spoken to any customers? No. I know what we're doing, you know, like Steve Jobs said. And like,
just need to believe.
Yes, just believe, and then if you ask customers what they want, like Henry Ford says, if you ask customers what they want, they'll say they want a faster horse. You know, like, so people believing that they just know what to do. I find, like, from experience also, like building stuff, talking to computers is easier than talking to humans. Like humans say, what are you saying? Or no, right? Could you tell us about the process that you would encourage people to take when they're thinking, I got money and I got an idea and I'm going to a dev house? Because for me, like if you go to a dev house, like me going to a barber to say, do I need a haircut? They're like, yeah, right? But asking a dev house, like, tell me what I should build. What is the process that you would take somebody through?
Yeah, sure. So, I think firstly, dev houses are agencies. They're there to sell time. They're not there to help you build the best product. And I think there's a certain subset of those that are venture builders or startup studios, and often what makes them different is their incentive structure. So that's definitely something to look out for. For me, building and launching any new product, it starts with a value proposition. Like that, for me, is the core of everything, of having a really clear value proposition of what is the problem you're solving for customers, and then what are potential solutions that you can resolve that for. So it's a lot of people love jumping into like a business model canvas or that sort of stuff. For me, that's steps 2, 3, 4, or 5. It starts with, are you solving a real problem for people? Like ultimately, all business is a value transfer. People pay you to get something in return. They pay you for value. So being really clear around who gets that value, why they get that value, what they find valuable about what your solution can offer, and how you deliver that value is the most important part to get right first. And if you want to spend $1 million rand building technology, spend 10,000 rand like interviewing customers, and spend 50,000 rand or 100,000 rand building some prototypes and testing them and getting feedback, and then spend the other 900,000. Like you'll spend that 900,000 so much better if you're actually doing those steps. So the lean iterator was kind of a 5-step process, and it was how to spend your first $100, $1,000, $10,000, and $100,000, and kind of what you need to focus on. The last step was scale, which was sort of VC, which is but yeah, so work out, like, if you want to spend a lot of money, sure, but start by spending little bits first, and then incrementally learn and iterate and grow and build around that.
And could you tell us, I remember you talked me through this, like, tell us about, if somebody says, I've got an idea, how much money does somebody need? I think you talked about it now, like idea, MVP, all of those stages, like just roughly how much does somebody need at every stage?
A piece of string is twice as long as half as length. Yeah, it differs. The short answer is, the universal answer is a lot less than what people think. And let me maybe take a quick segue here. So the lean startup, everyone thinks lean startup is around spending less money. And it's just not at all about that. Lean startup kind of came out of the lean manufacturing thinking or thought process, the Toyota production system. And that's around minimizing waste in a production line. And the core principle is that if every step in your production line is optimized, by definition, your production line is not optimized. And that's because one step is going to run slightly faster than the step before it. Like one of the steps will run slightly slower, and you get a buildup of waste sitting before it because you can't process it fast enough. And so the lean startup is around taking those principles but applying it to rate of learning. And at the early stage of an idea, you learn faster by spending less money. But at some point you reach in the idea validation, you need to start spending money in order to keep learning rapidly. And so that's the shift when you talk about like a lean startup and what that looks like. It's focused on the rate of learning. That build, measure, learn loop is like how quickly you go through that loop. And so when you're starting out, like how much money do you need? Well, it depends what you're trying to validate. The valuation of a startup, I'm going to do a quick caveat after this around small business and startups, but the valuation of a startup is directly proportional to the number of risks that you've removed. So the more risk you remove from an idea, the more value it is. At the moment, when it's just an idea, there are like an insanely large number of risks. You don't know if it's like, do people actually have this problem? Is there a potential solution to this? If I build that solution, will they actually use it? Which is another thing. If they use it, will they pay me? If they pay me, will enough people pay me to make the unit economics work? If the unit economics work, can this actually scale to enough markets? Like those are all risks in your business, and you normally just start with the biggest risks first, which is, do people have this problem, or who has this problem? And then what is the solution? What might a solution be to do that? How might we test that? And what is the fastest way in which we can learn the answer to that question? And so it's all about how do you run experiments to learn faster. One very quick segue, sorry, just to jump in around, like the one thing to note, so a lot of my advice and a lot of my experience comes from building startups. And a lot of those things translate to more traditional businesses, but it's not necessarily. And I think one of the mistakes that most people make when you're talking about entrepreneurship is they don't actually distinguish the difference between a startup and a small business, or a small business becoming a medium business becoming a large business, a traditional business, if you will. And for me, a traditional business is optimized around sustainability. You're trying to build a business that is sustainable all the way through. A startup or a high growth startup is typically the type of problem where you need to invest a whole bunch of money in R&D and building technologies and building IP and building that in order to get to enough customers to make it work. And those are VC backable businesses. Very few businesses are actually that type of business. And if you're raising that type of funding or you're getting that kind of advice, it's just really bad advice. So when I talk about a startup, I'm very intentionally talking about a business that's optimizing for hypergrowth. There are a couple of similar principles, but a lot of very different advice if you're optimizing for sustainability. So be careful of the type of advice that you get and the things that I say, like take that within that context. When I say a startup, I'm talking about high growth. When you talk about a traditional business, you're talking about sustainability. The value proposition still matters, but how you build a team, how you prioritize, how you ship and deliver against that is very different if you're optimizing for sustainability or if you're optimizing for hypergrowth.
That is a good point, because we do get sometimes people starting a small business, a traditional business, and they're going to angels and VCs, and then we find that the metrics are different, and then they're also like, somebody's completely nothing, no resources, nothing, and then you got two opportunities. You could build a traditional business that generates cash and pays you, or you go super innovative, super experimental and trying to crack the VC space. So what would be your take in terms of like the opportunities that Africa has got, like different countries in Africa, and then the way entrepreneurs look at all those opportunities? Should they always just look at like, I want to innovate, build the high growth startup, or it's a combination? What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's room for everything. Africa has so much opportunity. There's just so many gaps in infrastructure, so much unmet need, both for traditional businesses and for high growth, hyperscaler startups. So for me, it would look at more around what needs to be true for your idea to work at scale. Are you trying to build a $100 million business? Are you trying to get there rapidly? Do you need to spend millions of dollars in R&D or in shipping or growing market share? Like WhatsApp was worth, what did they sell for, like 19 billion or something, with a team of 40 people. Like, and it was the bargain, like the sale of the century, right? It was still a great buy for what it's worth today. They wouldn't have got to that scale or that size if they were trying to monetize early and only growing as fast as revenues would allow. That's a great example of a potentially high growth, hyperscale startup. But most opportunities in most businesses in Africa aren't that. They can still be amazing businesses. They can build really solid, really large businesses. Like when I talk about traditional businesses or starting as a small business, that doesn't mean you can't become a large business, medium business or large business. It just means it takes slightly longer and the decision-making frameworks are different. So I think there's a ton of opportunity on both fronts. I don't think it's an either or. The startup one is definitely much higher risk, much higher chance of failure, much higher chance of losing your hair. But I think small businesses also has its own risk, existential risks. Even though it's a lot more sustainable, you're a lot more susceptible to black swan events and that sort of thing. Whereas typically in a high growth startup, you are a rocket ship that often you just ride through. Something collapses, you shift to another country or move on beyond it. So it's like if there's a riot or if there's like an economic breakdown, a startup is probably going to survive that much more than a traditional business, which will suffer a lot more. But in the average day-to-day, the other 99.999% of the time, a small business or a traditional business is going to be a lot more sustainable. So it's neither one. Like one's not better than the other. They're just different for different people and different problems.
Brilliant. And now let's talk about product. What is according to you, what is like a preferred way of building product, and what are some of the mistakes you see people make when they're trying to build product?
Yeah, that's also quite a large question. I think the most common mistake I think is the one you think they want. They don't build what the customer actually needs, and often what a customer needs is much smaller. There's this great analogy of people don't want a hole in the wall. They want a picture hung. And so they don't want to drill. They don't want a hole in the wall. They actually want the picture hung. Like that's what they're trying to do. Nobody wants a home loan. Everyone wants a house. The home loan is just how you have to get there. And so many people are caught up in being solution focused instead of problem focused. And the biggest problem I see when people are trying to build businesses or trying to build solutions is you have an idea of what the solution needs to be. And when you have that idea, nothing you build that is less than that will be that. And so you're constantly trying to reach for like, oh no, it's not finished yet, it's not finished yet. But even if a smaller version would actually solve the customer's problem. And so when you become problem focused, you look at the problem that you're solving for a customer, there's normally multiple ways of solving that. You can solve that manually. You can go and concierge it and go and deliver the service. You can do what you call a Wizard of Oz, which is, it looks automated, but it's actually all just Google Sheets and people behind the scenes. One of the platforms we built domestically, I think is a great example of this, with a domestic worker marketplace, competitor to Sweep South. And the first version was a Wix. He came to me saying, I need to build this app. And I was like, you don't have any money, you don't have any customers, you're not going to spend anything. And so he built a Wix landing page in an afternoon with a Google form and PayFast. And when somebody went through the booking form, he checked in PayFast, had they paid? If not, he sent them an official looking email from an email template saying, please complete payment, and then inserted the link manually. And everyone was sending manually, and then he would WhatsApp all the domestic workers to check whether they were coming, message them on the day, and then send an official looking email or SMS saying, your domestic worker is on the way, or your domestic worker is running 5 minutes late. And so for the users, it felt like a completely automated system. It was totally just him pulling the strings in the background, and he did his first 100 bookings over 3 months like that. And then he came to me in like halfway through November saying, December is the big month, like when all this works, like we need to build all this tech. And I was like, you don't have any time, so rather pay take $10,000 and pay a couple of friends, or pay 3 or 4 friends, 2,000 or 3,000 rand for the December period and help them scale. And did 70 bookings in 1 month. And then off the back of that, off that early traction, the investors, I then introduced them to some investors in January, and they were like, wow, look at what he's done in the last 4 months. You can see the hockey stick going up to the right. He's validating that there's a real need here. He's shown resourcefulness in being able to ship and deliver quickly. Yes, we'll give you some funding to build the app, and we ended up building the app. And it ran for about 4 or 5 years, but ended up getting shut down for various competitive reasons where the actual business model just doesn't work. But yeah, so it's like just thinking through that, like being problem focused and how can you solve the problem, there's normally many answers to that question. Whereas how do you build this solution, there's normally only one answer. And so by being more problem focused, you're more likely to build innovative, cheaper, faster, leaner solutions to that.
Fantastic. Actually, we've seen that, like, where somebody's focused on they're in love with the solution, like a method. You know, like, oh, I've got a weight loss product, but how everybody should lose weight is this way. You know, and people are like, no, I don't like the way you're suggesting I should lose weight. You know, and then it fails. Whereas if you're looking at the problem and what people ultimately want, we could try different things. So coming to that same point, like, what do investors want to see in a business before they invest? And to what you have talked about with the domestic example, what are some of the things that somebody would need to have in place before an investor say, yes, I'll give you some money?
Sure, so yeah, maybe let me answer this question twice, once for startups and once for traditional businesses. For startups, you're looking to get along that risk curve as much as possible. And it depends on, there's different types of funding for different stages. So the early stage funding will come from friends, family, and fools, or grant funding. That's really like, hey, I have this idea, I want to test it, can I do that? Like you'll probably raise a small amount of money at a very low valuation to kind of test the idea. And that will, a lot of it be like chatting to customers or trying to manually solve the problem. If you're very problem focused, you go to someone and say, do you have this problem? And it's like, will you pay me to solve that for you? Or can I solve that for you for free? I will do it manually and deliver that. Is normally like the way you would start. And then once you've got like some prototypes, or you've started solving that problem in some way, shape, or form, you normally then need to raise a little bit more funding to actually build out a solution to ship and build that in a slightly more sustainable way. So it might be a first version of an app or a low-code tool or something like that. And so that'll typically be your angel funding or pre-seed. There's a couple of early stage funders that'll invest in that sort of stage as well. And that's really around product. Like the first one is there a problem? The second, those angels are looking at sort of, can you build a solution? Can you build a solution and will people use it? Those are the kind of the questions they're trying to answer. And once you've got a small number of users who will actually use it, you're then starting to move into later stage sort of seed funding, which is really much around looking at like, can we grow this and can we make the business model make sense? And so you're looking at, can we scale just enough to get the unit economics to make sense, to get enough volume through the business, to get a real understanding of the mechanics and the levers, to understand like how the production line works, that chickens go in and pies go out. Like what are all the steps in the machines that happen in the step in between that? And so that's what typically what your seed funding is looking for. And then your Series A or venture capital funding is looking like, you've got this working, you've got it working in the local market. How do we help you scale to an international market? How do we help you scale to a new region? How do we help you, like, now that you can prove time and time again that for every 10 rand we put in, we get 100 rand out, let me give you 10 million rand and let's get 100 million out. That's the VC, that's like the late stage VC, Series A type space. In Africa, the VCs often play a little bit more early. They play early VC, they play seed stage. But that's typically what you're looking for, validation at those things. Once you get beyond Series A's, then you're looking at private equity, and that's like really driving unit economics and partnerships and unlocking value for acquisitions and things. Traditional businesses are slightly different. Traditional businesses, you don't generally need this huge upfront cost investment in R&D and product development. You don't need to hire a bunch of software developers to build the thing before you can actually sell it. If you're looking in more traditional manufacturing or physical products or just service-based businesses or anything like that, there you want to look at, can I deliver it, can I do the service, then can I document it so that I pay somebody else to deliver that or deliver that service for it? So can I hire interns? Can I give them clear enough instructions that an intern can do what I would do in that situation? And then you can look at starting to automate and like, hey, we can reach more distribution if we focus on through a distribution partner. Like I was telling someone earlier about using Takealot as a distribution channel on how you can scale that. Or looking at how do we automate through driving efficiency so we can actually have, instead of doing 1 hour of work for 1 hour of value, how do we use low-code tools or how do we build a small layer of tech in order to scale that traditional business to be able to do like 10 minutes of value, of work to get 1 hour of value. And there your funding is going to be quite different. The types of investors are not going to get these they're not taking high risks, they're not looking for super high returns. So there are things like debt funding, grant funding, pre-sales from customers is a really great thing, like getting customers to pay early and then deliver the service is a great, like customer revenue is by far the best way to fund a traditional business. If you can pre-sell or sell through that or get people, like even crowdfunding campaigns are kind of a mechanism of that, where like buy this product, but give us the money now so we can build it and deliver it for you. If you can get people, that's a really great evidence of demand. Those sort of things. You can look at debt funding as well, like technology innovation agencies or like other types of grants or small business support loans. There's a number of those sort of services, invoice factoring, debt financing, those sorts of things. Like there's quite a lot of mechanisms to support traditional businesses in that sense. But those are very different to the high risk, high reward, VC, high scale businesses. So yeah.
What opinion do you have about entrepreneurship that's not very popular, or something you usually don't say but should be said?
I say this quite often, but I think it's uncommon. It's not commonly believed in that entrepreneurship in business is actually so simple. You're delivering value to someone and they're paying you for it. The whole process is how can you do that in a repeatable way, and then how can you do that more and more efficiently. And so the core principles is deliver value, get money, and then optimize my efficiency, cost of goods, and how I can do that at more scale. Like, there's so many ways of complicating it, there's so many ways to get caught up in all the jargon and the fundraising. Actually, that's what it's all about. And just focusing on that and identifying what is the next blocker to do that radically simplifies so much of getting caught up in the nonsense.